Record on my computer. Such the official Zoom announcement that the recording is in progress. So welcome everyone. I am going to be sharing my screen here in a moment, and I just wanted to say thanks. Thanks for joining me. I love doing this just because it is one of those things where I love interacting with people and I love seeing people. And it's one of those situations where I hope to share a little bit of some nuggets of knowledge today. And one of the best, or one of my favorite ways to do that is through the Zoom feature, since we're not really able to see one another from all over the US and Canada. We're not really able to see one another in person as well. So Climb Clinic, this is the webinar today. It's going to be a webinar that really, my hope is to make you unstoppable when it comes to climbing, okay? I'm going to keep it pretty easy here just for you. So climbing to me is a lot more about your technique, body position, your mindset, and all of that, as well as your strength, more than you think it is, all right? It's not so much a matter of you needing to be an amazing climber. There are some tweaks that you can make to make yourself an amazing climber. And I will be talking about that from not only just a strength coach and conditioning coach, but also from the perspective of being a mountain biking coach as well, because I am PMBI certified. So I do have a little bit of knowledge with that. So hopefully that'll help. All right, first tip is going to be technique. Technique is incredibly paramount. And to get into good technique for climbing, really, you want to be in the right position. And to get into your right position, scoot your hips forward on the saddle a bit. It'll feel like the saddle is getting a little frisky with you and getting a little inappropriate, for lack of a better way to put it. And that basically means and indicates that you are in a good position on that saddle. Ideally, you do want to hinge a little bit at your hips. So hinging just ever so slightly at the hips to get that chest closer to the handlebar is really going to be advantageous for you to be in that right position. The other thing is to help keep your wrists fairly low. So instead of having your hands at this angle as you're climbing, because that would be really awkward anyways, you want your elbows to kind of be down and your wrist to be down. Now, on top of that, and especially if you're doing a steeper climb, the steeper the climb, the more your wrists are probably going to have to be back. It all just kind of depends on your comfort level and your wrists. With that being said, you also want to pull back on your handlebars a little bit. And the reason for that, if you caught my podcast a few episodes ago, I can't remember which episode off the top of my head, but I talked about indoor training and how to ride effectively on an indoor trainer or an indoor bike. And one of my tips was to help to engage your posterior chain. You want to engage your lats. So you want to really just pull back on your handlebars, no matter what kind of handlebar you're on or what kind of bike you're on. It's one of those situations where engaging your lats will help you therefore engage your posterior chain. And when I say posterior chain, I mean your glutes, your hamstrings, and all of that. And the reason for that is because the lats will help the body recognize, oh, okay, great. I'm engaging a little bit of my posterior chain with my back muscles. Now let me go ahead and engage the rest of the posterior chain. You're going to hear that very commonly with other physical therapists. If you've ever worked with a PT, they'll probably bring that about, especially if they do specialize in cyclists, okay? So pull back on the handlebar a little bit as you're climbing. And notice I said pull back, not up, because I don't want the front wheel to come up unless you're going over some features and things like that. But stay seated on your saddle for as long as you possibly can, because once you get out of the saddle and you do make that leap out of the saddle, of course, if you've ever experienced this, the rear wheel can kind of hop up. Sometimes even the front wheel can kind of get a little bit of awry or ajar, and that's fine, but definitely try to stay seated as much as possible, because all of these tips that I just shared ultimately will help keep that front wheel weighted, and it will help give you that traction that you really want, especially if you are climbing something that's a little bit more technical, okay? The biggest thing, and I will see this time and time again at clinics that I coach at or assistant coach at, is the lack of scooting your hips forward. That is so important. So have that saddle get a little inappropriate with you. It's going to be in a weird place, like the edge or the tip of the saddle. It's going to be kind of in a weird place, whether you're a guy or girl. And that's fine. That indicates like, okay, great. You're moving your hips, you're moving your center of balance up a little bit more. All right. The next thing with technique is to try to smooth out your pedal stroke as much as possible. You want to think smooth circles more than anything. Okay. Some people do need to maybe do a little bit more ovals, and that's totally fine. But whatever will work to help you have even pressure on the pedal stroke throughout the entire pedal stroke, instead of doing a little bit more mashing, which I know I can be guilty of sometimes. It's a little bit easier to be smoother in my pedal stroke on my road bike versus my mountain bike. But this is definitely something that's really important to keep in mind when you're on your mountain bike too. Okay. Second thing, and this also goes hand in hand with the first tip that I just shared. Second thing is to find the right cadence and pace yourself. Pace the climb, don't race it. I should have actually probably put that first instead of the last bullet point, because I feel like all too often we just want to get the climb over with sometimes. And sometimes people will just hammer and lay down the hammer on their climbs right in the beginning. And unfortunately, that can kind of just tucker you out a little bit, or poop you out, whatever the word is, just tire you out. And, the biggest thing is just pace and ease into it. Okay. Spinning too much in terms of your cadence, which is the rate of your pedal stroke, spinning too much with your pedals or too fast can definitely fatigue you a lot more. And, it can increase your heart rate, increase your breathing, just because you're spinning out a little bit. Also, when you're spinning out a little bit, unfortunately, you can lose traction as well. And that's definitely not what you want to do, especially while you're mountain biking. You want to maintain that traction as much as possible. Okay. And then being in too hard of a gear, if it's a heavy gear and you're kind of grinding it out, that can definitely put too much tension on your muscles, especially your quads and things like that. And maybe even have you kind of engage your back a little too much. So you might start to notice that, like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit of back pain or something like that. And that's because your body is just trying to generate watts and generate power from whatever it can get. And usually your back, unfortunately, for a lot of us, is the first to go, because our core is usually a little bit on the weaker side. And again, that's not a bad thing by any means. It just kind of shows that we might need to work on a couple of things. Okay. So ideally, right around 60 to 90 RPMs, or revolutions per minute, is a good happy place for most of us. Okay. What that looks like varies for everyone. I mean, it's going to be 60 to 90 RPM no matter what. But what that looks and feels like to everyone in terms of your rate of perceived exertion and how hard you're working, that's going to vary. Okay. That will vary person to person just based on your skill and experience and all of that. But what I like to think about when I'm thinking about 60 to 90 RPMs is that's a good pedal stroke per second, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Okay. 1 to 1.5 pedal strokes per second is about in that range. So if that helps you at all. What I like to think about in terms of finding the right cadence is just remember ACE. You want to be able to ace the right cadence. And that means accelerate, comfortable, and efficient. That's what your pedal stroke needs to be. And what that means is that you should be able to accelerate at any moment. So if you're in the 60 to 90 RPMs, you should be able to kind of increase that power a little bit. Of course, that might be different if it's a really steep climb. You might not be able to kind of, generate too much out of your pedals, and that's fine. But you should be at a comfortable pace. So kind of like what I mentioned a moment ago, that rate of perceived exertion, I like to look at that instead of my power meter. Just ignore the power meter. If you have one of those fancy contraptions on your bike, try to ignore that number, because sometimes we look at that and we're like, why am I not hitting like 200 watts or 300 watts? That's BS. I should be. And we start to have a case of the shoulds, because technology is telling us we need to be doing something else. I'm kind of a little bit against power meters, which I know is a very unusual stance for a strength and conditioning coach who's a cyclist, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is because we become too dependent on our technology. We forget how to get in touch with us and how we're feeling for the day. While it's great, and I do think technology can certainly serve a purpose, I think sometimes we depend a little bit too much on that. And unfortunately, that puts us in this cave thinking of, I'm not doing what I need to be doing. And then we start to panic, and then just the climb goes out the window. All right. And then your whole bike ride just goes out the window, and it's not as enjoyable. I want to help bring fun back into bike riding. I want to help bring fun back into training. And that's always my goal when I do say kind of extreme things like that, and talk about how I don't like to depend on a power meter. there's a reason for it, because I want you all to enjoy your training. Okay. The other thing is you want the pedal stroke to be, or the cadence to be efficient. And that goes hand in hand with you having that nice, smooth pedal stroke, like we talked about on the last slide, as well as also just not clunking, not clunking down on it. So that's what the cadence should look like. So just think and remind yourself, you need to ace your cadence. You need to be able to have the ability to accelerate, be at a comfortable pace, and then also just be efficient with that pedal stroke. Okay. All right. Tip number 3. This is going to be a big one. And this is a big one, especially for a lot of my good friends that I ride with. Change your internal dialogue. And I like to say, you love biking. You know, we need to remember that we love biking, even if the climb sucks, because, you know, what you think is ultimately what you're going to believe on the ride or at any point in your life. Okay. So if you start off the climb thinking that you hate it and you're like, I'm going to have to do this, you know, just to get to the downhill, then yeah, it's going to suck. Like, for lack of a better way to put it, it's just going to stink. So I like to use a mantra just to remind myself what I'm doing and why I'm there, you know, A, to have fun with my friends or to train or what have you. But, you know, tongue in cheek, I'm kind of cheeky when it comes to, if you haven't figured that out yet, I'm a little cheeky when it comes to certain statements, but I like the mantra of, I love biking. You know, if someone asks me, like while I was doing the triple bypass a couple of years ago, hey, how's it going? You know, and I'm at maybe like mile 75 or something, and we have like 120 miles. I think I at one point told my friends, I love biking, you know, even though it was absolutely torturous at that point. But it's one of those things where you just have to remind yourself, you do love biking. You love the feeling of like wind on your face, and you love just being on your bike, even if you're climbing. So it is a nice little reminder why you're doing it. So try to shift that mindset from, damn it, there's another climb, to, hey, I love biking. This is a part of biking. This might be a part that I might not like as much, but I'm just going to put my head down and put in the work. Okay. And I do like to emphasize approaching the climbs with a little bit of excitement, you know, thinking of it maybe as a little bit of a challenge that you can handle, you can ultimately handle. And it's a good kind of challenge, because if we're not challenged, we're not growing. I'm a real big proponent of that type of mindset and that type of mentality. And last but certainly not least, to help make the climb a little bit more bearable, try to break the climb into smaller chunks or sections. You know, I'll give you an example. You know, if you're looking at something and your head's kind of down and you're in the headspace that you want to be in, just thinking like, okay, let me just make it to that rock. Let me just make it to that tree. Let me just make it to that sign that's ahead, you know, at the fork or whatever. Just give yourself little incremental like things to focus on, and that will help break that climb apart, instead of thinking about the long game of the entire climb that you have to do. Okay. So those are hopefully some tips that'll help you kind of get in a little bit of a healthier headspace, but ultimately just remember to try to stay positive. So actually on the last slide, when I did talk about a mantra, you don't have to say, I love biking. That was just an idea. Like, that's what I do, because I'm slightly sarcastic if you know me. But I do ultimately believe, like, I love biking. I do love biking, but saying it during a climb, it's believable. Whatever the mantra is for you, the only thing that I ask is that, or the only thing I recommend rather, is that you make it a positive one. So it needs to be a positive mantra. So don't say, and when I say that, that basically means that I'm encouraging you not to say not, or not to say no. Like, I will not do this, or I will not do that, because then it's a little bit of a negative statement. Even though it might be positive in your head, it can be a little bit of a negative statement because you are using the word no or not. So instead, think about an action that you want to do. So, instead of saying, don't stop, instead of saying that as your mantra, say, keep going. Does that make sense? Hopefully, it's a little bit of a wordsmith, tweak, but it does help, and it does make a really big difference. All right, number 4, and this is my favorite. Just make sure you're eating enough food. And food is fuel. It is obviously more than that. It does have a cultural implication to who we are, and it's who we identify as, and everything. So there is importance in that, and I definitely don't want to take away from that. But ultimately, it is what helps keep you going, and it is what really helps fuel your adventures and your biking and all of that stuff. So just a little bit of a friendly reminder, eating about 1,200 to 1,800 calories might not be enough for you. It just depends. Everyone's different. Nutrition journeys are individual. Active females, just to give you an idea, you should have about 2,000 calories or so. And that's kind of a good baseline, unless maybe you're doing a little bit of a cut or things like that. Now, keep in mind, this is a broad brush stroke that I'm putting out here. And then active males, about 2,000 to 3,000 calories at a baseline. This is kind of maintenance if you're active, okay? And you just want to maintain. So this is just thinking about you not wanting to necessarily diet or lose any body fat or anything like that. Because obviously, if you do want to lose a little bit of body fat or you have that goal in mind, then yeah, you might be eating a little bit less. But if you want to eat for performance, you will probably need to eat a little bit more. Now, keep in mind, there is a little bit of metabolic adaptation that can happen if you do diet for too long. So I don't recommend dieting for longer than about 12 to 16 weeks at a time. It's about 3 to 4 months, just, out of curiosity, and not more than a couple of times a year, because your body needs a break, because your metabolism will adapt to the lower calories if you're there for too long, or, even at the higher calories if you're there for too long as well. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind going forward. Now, maintenance calories, those are my favorite calories other than surplus, obviously eating more. But maintenance calories is the best and usually the happiest place for folks to be most of the time. And that's where you're just maintaining your weight and your physique and things like that. Now, you can diet too long, kind of like what I said earlier, but you really can't spend too long at maintenance. So that's a good place to kind of be. And if you're curious if you are under eating at all, there are some signs. You can also obviously see a registered dietitian if you want, or a nutrition or health coach like me, just so we can kind of talk about some symptoms that you are getting. I would probably encourage, maybe getting some blood work if you are experiencing things that might be a little unusual for you, just because I think that an annual blood work panel is going to be healthy for you anyways. And I can always work with your doctor if you want to, but that's neither here nor there. This is just for you to get started kind of on your own, with or without me. But there are some signs that you might be under eating, and you can see them here, at least most of them. Poor sleep, if you wake up a lot, especially in the middle of the night. This is not considering if you're postmenopausal or perimenopausal, like, yours truly. So do keep in mind, hormones can also play a little bit of a role in certain things too. So this is not a blanket statement. These are just some potential symptoms, if you have low energy, if you're moody, if you have no or low sex drive, and if you are noticing poor performance as well as no PRs, then that can obviously, impact it for you, or be a sign that you're under eating. If you can't necessarily lose weight or fat, or if you have low hunger, or even if you're hungry all the time, that can also be a sign that you are under eating. Most importantly, for those of you who are menstruating individuals, if you have irregular or no periods at all, that is definitely something I would go and get checked out by a medical professional, because that is obviously out of my scope of practice. And I definitely want you to not have this low energy state for a long period of time. And also, if you do have some hair loss or thinning hair or low hormone or thyroid levels with your blood work, as well as losing desire to train or ride, that is going to be really key. If you just have absolutely no desire to train or ride and you're sleeping well, then, it might be either a combination of you needing to get really clear on why you're training and why you want to train, and getting a little bit more excited about that, or having a goal in mind or a race in mind. That might help as well. Or it could just be a matter of maybe needing to dial in sleep. So there are a couple of reasons, but these are just some things that I wanted to put out here just so you can kind of think and reflect on maybe your current situation, because everyone's different and I think it's worth exploring. And if you're curious, I'll just breeze through this, but if you are curious how to loosely calculate your nutritional needs, I do recommend a couple of these calculators. It's tdeecalculator.net, as well as Precision Nutrition's macro calculator, and it calculates your macronutrients. These are both free calculators. And you might be somewhere, usually what I find is you might be somewhere in between these calculations. So what I recommend is this is just to get you in the ballpark, okay? Experiment, give it at least 2 to 4 weeks at a time before making changes. and then only make slight changes of like 100 to 200 calories at a time, and only for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. I usually recommend 2 weeks because you need at least 2 weeks usually of consistent effort. And, again, this is only if counting your food and tracking your food doesn't trigger you. Obviously, if this triggers you and maybe you have a little bit of an ED past or history, then don't do it. I do not recommend doing that. Then I recommend reaching out to a registered dietitian, someone who's qualified to give you a meal plan and prescribe you meal plans, which is out of my scope of practice, and someone who can really work with you through that. Okay. So I want what's best for you. I'm always like, to me, it's whatever's good for you. That is in my best interest as well as yours. So, these are just some reminders and kind of some things to explore, and then get a coach to help you if you absolutely need to. But I think that for the most part, a lot of folks can kind of start to get an idea, and maybe then work with a coach if you want to like fine tune some stuff. Okay. All right. Number 5, this is the fun one. This is practicing. Practicing is fun because guess what? That means you're biking and you're on your bike, which is fantastic. So skill work is 100% necessary, and climbing does take skill, like you've already figured out with the last few items that I've talked about. So I do recommend when you are climbing, these are some things that you can kind of exercise. And someone did send me a chat, and I apologize, but I have 2 screens on my computer and it will not let me open the chat box. So I apologize. Oh, wait, no, it will now. Oh, stop it. Are those daily numbers? Thank you, Ben. $1,800 per hour. Yeah. Oh, no, not per hour. That would be awful. That would be amazing. You'd be in like a food eating like competition. So Ben was just asking if those were daily numbers in terms of calories. And yeah, those are definitely daily numbers. Definitely not what you need to eat on the bike or, per hour or anything like that. So I'd say, in the range. And again, I'm real big on ranges because you just kind of want to figure out what works for you. And if you do want to track your food ever, I do like MyFitnessPal because it's free. You can pay $50 a year if you want to do that. I just like it because it's easy, because you don't have to weigh and measure your food, because not everyone wants to do that business. And I don't recommend that for everyone either. So I really recommend using MyFitnessPal and just using their generic entries, because that will get you at least an idea, and that will get you in the ballpark of what you're eating. And that's ultimately what you want to do, just kind of figure out how much you are eating. Okay. So practice. Skill work is 100% necessary. Climbing does take skill. So some things you can practice are practice picking your line and choosing the path of least resistance, especially if it is a technical section. Everyone's favorite, my favorite included. Just kidding. Not climbing. Climbing technical stuff is not usually my favorite thing. But, that is a skill that you can focus on, is looking at the now and looking at the next on the trail, so looking at 1 to 2 seconds in front of your wheel versus 3 to 8 seconds or 10 seconds in front of your wheel. And just bouncing and ping ponging between those 2 points on the trail is really important. And that is a skill that you can work on. Another thing is sometimes when we see a feature, and I'm guilty of this sometimes as well. Sometimes when we see a feature that we're climbing up, we might slow down a little bit. And unfortunately, when we're in the middle of slowing down before we hit the feature, we might be going a little too slow. So what I recommend is, especially if it's a feature that really you need to get over, accelerate a little bit before you hit the feature. Accelerate, that way you can easily unweight that wheel a little bit with some other skill work that you can work on. But don't stop if you see a feature, if you can. Don't freeze up. Try not to freeze up. Try to keep going and accelerate just a little bit to get that momentum going. That way it'll be a little bit easier for you to get over, that obstacle. Now, I do also recommend being in a slightly harder gear before you get into features, so that way you don't spin out. And that's because all too often, again, guilty of this as well, sometimes we might be in like the eagle gear, if you have that gearing on your bike, or the easiest gear, the granny gear. I actually don't like calling it a granny gear because, I know some pretty dang badass grandmas. I don't know about you all, but I do. But yeah, if you're in the easiest gear on your bike, unfortunately, that can oftentimes cause us to lose the traction. And traction is something we definitely want to keep as much as we can in our riding. Okay. So those are just some skill ideas, just to give you something to kind of think about. And what I do recommend is incorporating some of the skill work, even if it's 10 to 15 minutes before your ride, if you're just warming up in the parking lot, or you're warming up maybe on the bike park that's nearby, or whatever, if you're hopping over obstacles in the park, if you're hopping over curbs or something like that, spend 10 to 15 minutes before or after your rides. Or you can also do it during your ride. If you're going to go ahead and hit the trail, give yourself that idea of, hey, I'm going to work on accelerating towards my features today, or I'm going to work on being in a slightly harder gear before features. Just one more gear. Just try one more gear and see what that feels like. Okay. You'll notice you might have a little bit more, not only traction, but a little bit more power as you get into it, which is really exciting. And then, of course, have a skills practice session with a friend or even a coach. One time a week on average is what I usually recommend my one-on-one clients to do. Is I'll literally program them like a choice ride for that day and like tell them like, hey, you want to work on descending switchbacks, like downhill switchbacks? Awesome. Like, let's work on that today. That'll be your skill work during this ride. So give yourself that goal of some skill work to work on during the ride. And that will give you a little bit of a purpose in addition to you having fun on that ride, because not every ride can be like just hammer fest. All right. I mean, it can, but then you're just going to not enjoy it all the time. And then you're going to start to feel burnout. You can also hire a mountain biking coach. At Vita, I will say there's Vita and there's a few other organizations here in Colorado and of course nationwide. So if you do live outside of Colorado, let me know. I do have some connections in other states. I'm more than happy to connect you with a local coach if you need any help with that. But Vita does have some good coaches and they're also able to do one-on-one coaching. I really recommend Tori Royal. She is a very experienced coach. She actually, Helen, so you remember Tori. So she led the group that we coached this past weekend in Snowmass. She's chill. She will lay everything out for you in very easy to understand way. And she's just easy to work with. Like, she doesn't get flustered at all. She's super supportive and she'll push you. She'll push you a little bit out of your comfort level in a safe environment, which is really good. But I've definitely worked with some other coaches that have been coached by her, or not other coaches, other riders rather, that have been coached by her and have really enjoyed their one-on-one sessions with her. So something to think about. She is with vitamtb.com. I don't get paid anything to say this. This is just who I believe in. And yeah, Tori's not slipping me a 20 for saying that. So, I mean, it would be nice if she would slip me a 20 for saying that, but she's not. This is literally me saying it because I believe in her as a coach, and I believe in others at Vita and other organizations as a coach. All right. Hold on a minute. There we go. All right. Last but not least, again, I think they're all my favorites. This is also my favorite. Increasing strength to handle the climbs. So the stronger you are naturally, the more power you can generate to your pedals, and the more that power is translated to your pedals rather. And climbing does get easier the stronger you are, and descending also gets smoother because you're even able to handle it with your upper body. And your body ultimately becomes more resilient to injury. That to me is my favorite part of it, because yeah, I feel strong on the bike and everything, but to be resilient to injury, should I crash or when I crash, that makes me have a little bit more peace of mind. And it also helps build your confidence, because that is one thing that you can easily lose after a crash. It's just your sense of confidence on your bike. So knowing that you can bounce back from injury relatively well is really so empowering. And then also, this is something that's often overlooked, is that more strength also means that you have better endurance. And I know it sounds kind of weird, because I know folks might be thinking, well, that makes no sense because endurance is endurance, Jen. But here's the thing. The stronger you are, the more your muscles are used to firing repetitively, the better endurance you're going to have ultimately. All right. So I am really big on full body strength, and that does include upper body strength. And I know there are some coaches out on the circuit right now, especially if they're road cycling coaches, who unfortunately they don't really believe in upper body strength, which is unfortunately doing their athletes a disservice, because they're bent over. And I want you just to think about the position that you're in, especially when you're climbing. You're bent over, you're hinging at the hips. You are in a very vulnerable position over your bike. So you're really having to engage your core. Your core is definitely being worked, but also your hands are a contact point on the bike, as well as your feet naturally and your butt. But your hands are a contact point on your bike. So you need to have your support structure in place. And how you can do that is with a stronger upper body. It's just unfortunate because sometimes, especially road cycling coaches, they think that the thicker or the stronger someone is in their upper body, it's taking away from their road cycling abilities. And I know you all are mountain bikers rather. But just to give you an idea, in case you do hear it out on, especially social media and things like that, it's just unfortunate because it is doing them a disservice because you're going to be weaker in the upper body, and that won't necessarily translate to you being more resilient on the bike, whether you're on a road bike, cyclocross, mountain biking, no matter what type of biking, even gravel riding, especially gravel riding, because gravel roads are squirrely, but have that full body strength. It's incredibly important, and it does help enhance your endurance. And no, you do not need to do climbing intervals 4 times a week. I have talked to folks on the phone where they are working with someone and they're being assigned 4 climbing intervals or hill intervals a week. That is not what you need in order to become a climber. If anything, maybe 1 climbing interval per week where you're focused on climbing, and then have some fun rides, have some training rides where you're really trying to crush the climbs on the rides. But you shouldn't be doing, in my opinion, it's not going to support your goals to become a better climber by doing that many intervals per week. If anything, it could just tax you and just exhaust you and overtraining. So here are some ideas on how to incorporate some strength. The first thing is I really do recommend aiming for some main movements, and that's squats, deadlifts, any type of push or press, as well as any type of pulling movements or rowing and things like that. So those are your main movements. And then also, I do really recommend lifting at least twice a week, preferably using a full body type of routine. So using push pull and things like that is going to be ideal. That way you're not in the gym 5 days a week, because I don't know about you, but the days are getting shorter. So I want to milk my time outside as much as I possibly can, or inside on the intervals and things like that. So I want to be on my bike as much as possible. That means that I really can't be in the gym 5 days a week, unfortunately. So I usually prefer 2 to 3 days of strength training per week. I think that that's ideal, especially for those of us that run or bike or do other things or ski or snowboard, because then it gives you time to have a life and then also be with your family, and then also not overtrain too. Okay. Now, accessory work. I do also think that on top of those main movements that I already talked about, adding in some accessory work, like working shoulders, sounds silly, and you can make fun of me. You can even make fun of me in the chat right now. It's okay. I will not take it personally. But working your biceps and tries, working your biceps and triceps is really important, because that actually helps support your shoulder even more. And our shoulders, the reason I emphasize shoulders, and I know all too well from personal experience with a crash a few years ago in snowmass, shoulders are vulnerable, because when you think about whenever you crash on a mountain bike, other than your head, obviously, your shoulders are incredibly vulnerable, because generally our reaction is to reach out and to cushion our fall, because we're trying to protect our head. We're trying to protect our noggin, even if we have a helmet. Because of that, we can extend or hyperextend our shoulder. We can dislocate it. We can have an AC break or an AC dislocation, which are the AC joints here, right along kind of your clavicle area. So because of that, it's kind of an ongoing joke with my clients and I, and that I do program in biceps and triceps and, face pulls and things like that, because it does help with your shoulders. So when I say accessory work, I basically mean like that type of accessory work, as well as single arm movements and single leg movements, because we are on a bike and each leg, while it is connected to a set of pedals that are connected, you are moving independently. Okay. So your legs aren't doing the same thing. You're not biking like this with your feet. You're biking like this. So this is why lunges and a lot of single leg movement are important, as well as really getting your ankles and things like that as mobile as possible, because that will ultimately help you with your point of contact with your feet on your bike. Okay. And then of course, add in rides, have fun. And this is of course based on goals, energy, and your schedule, especially if you're like a new parent or something like that. Oh goodness, do not try to do like the rise and grind ride like 5 days a week. Like maybe that's not cool if you're only getting 3 to 5 hours of sleep every night as a new parent, or, if you work shift. I work with a lot of shift workers, especially in healthcare. Maybe you just got off a 12-hour shift or a 24 or whatever the shift is. Maybe, unless your energy's good, maybe that's not the best time to go and do like a 20-mile bike ride or something, or do an epic bike ride. So just kind of play around with those things, but make your schedule and strength and everything like that work for you. Okay. I do recommend focused intervals at least once a week because it does help keep things fresh. And it also helps you push yourself a little bit more and see kind of what you're capable of. And what's cool is a specific interval can help you, and it will translate so well to trail time. Okay. If this is all like making your eyes glaze over, especially that last screen, because it can be a little tricky to put together your own plan, that's fine. That's totally fine. That's why I do the Shred Strong program. I'm going to make a plug here because I do want to help do like a Q&A for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more. A Q&A on what I just discussed about climbing, and then I'll have also a Q&A about Shred Strong. You can ask me anything. But just to let you know, the next phase, it does start October 11th. It's a Monday. It does go for a full year. You don't have to do it for a full year, though. It's totally up to you. You can cancel anytime. But it is a progressive overload program. And what I mean by that is you're making shifts every month. So every month, for 2 weeks at a time, I set up the programming to have that push, pull, and full body workout that we already talked about, along with all the accessory work and an interval. But I have that go for 2 weeks. And then the following 2 weeks in that first month, okay, great. We're going to increase the reps. We're going to try to increase the resistance or whatever our focus is during that cycle, because we're looking to increase our ability to do this. So it is not, full disclosure, it is not the type of program where every workout is different. And that's on purpose, because if every workout every week is, or every month rather, or every 2 weeks is different, then you're having to learn the workout over again. Okay. Which, because I'm not there with you, I don't have my eyes on you, and I want to do this in a safe, structured way. So this is a really ideal way for you to really increase your strength overall. Okay. But that's what I mean by progressive overload programming, is we are looking to increase our reps and our resistance, things like that as we go along. Okay. And it does change based on the season. So that's why I'm doing it all year. And, going into winter, this is a good time to build strength. So we are going to be having a little bit lower reps for the big movements like squats and deadlifts and things like that. We're going to have lower reps for that to really help you focus on the tension that you're building and the strength that you're building. And then accessory movements are going to be about the same in terms of, yeah, we're going to want to go heavier, but you might be a little bit higher repetition just because it is more of an isolation movement. But again, I don't want to bore you with that, but just so you know, it is progressive overload and you are going through the season with me, because this is the same program I use. Literally, like I might test some things out a little early before you all, but the thing is this is the program that I'm doing to train. So it's something that is important to me because it's also my training as well. And what it does include is it includes 3 strength workouts a week. It does include core as well as some optional conditioning. One of those strength workouts is optional as well. So I'll do 2 main full body workouts. And then there's usually a third workout that might work the shoulders a little bit more, or it might work rowing a little bit more. That way you can get kind of a double dose of some things that are really important and often overlooked for mountain bikers again in the week. But again, these workouts, depending on if you use barbell or if you're just a dumbbell only athlete, barbell workouts will take about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. So twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And actually that third workout's usually shorter anyways. So barbell will take a little bit longer just because you do have to load up the barbell and you do have to increase the weight that way. So it's more time consuming. Now, if you're not using a barbell, usually they take about 30 to 45 minutes, just to give you a little bit of an idea. But there's all workouts, there's demo videos, there's detailed instructions and everything. It's all delivered in an app. So no spreadsheets or anything like that. And what's cool is in the app, you can communicate directly with me if you have any questions, if you need a substitution, if you did end up maybe breaking your clavicle, but you're like, hey, I'm actually good. Like, I still want to do some lower body stuff. Great. I'll help you do some substitutions that will help keep that upper body pretty stable for especially the first few weeks while you're healing. But yeah, it's really cool because you can message me. There is a group message in there that we can communicate with one another. And I will also be doing like a monthly focus tutorial on one particular movement that we're working on. So we're really going to hone in on that. Generally, it's like deadlifts or squats to begin with, because I want to make sure that you all are moving really well, because that's important to me. You know, your safety is very important, and I want you to feel confident when you go into the weight room or the gym. Now, I do give feedback on form once a week on one particular movement, and I will give suggestions in the app of what I want my eyes to be on for you. And again, usually it's squatting and deadlifts, especially at first. Just want to make sure everyone's moving safely, okay? And then Zoom Q&A. This is something I'm starting to do that's newer. So about every 4 to 6 weeks, it might need to change, especially around the holidays, but about every 4 to 6 weeks, I'll talk about various topics. And I might even have you all like vote on the topics in the Facebook group or something like that. We do have a free Facebook group as well. But, you know, it's a time for us to kind of chat and kind of like do this a little bit more. I'll talk probably even less, like much, much less, like maybe even just like a 10 or 15 minute like presentation, or I hate even saying presentation, but like 10 to 15 minute review of something. And then you all can kind of like just chat and we can just kind of talk with one another. I think that that's going to be really important just to help build a community, because I'm all about building a community right now. But it is $49 a month. You can cancel anytime. If you want to give it a shot for a couple months, you can do that. No hard feelings at all. Or you can also do a 6-month program. And that's 6 months altogether at $239 for the 6 months. And that basically is $39 a month. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up. Now, I don't advertise this because this requires me to go through the Better Business Bureau and all this other stuff. But the portion of my net sales, just to let you know, and I do this already anyways, every quarter, I always donate to a local trail service. So last 2 quarters have been Comba. And also like giving back to another Shred Strong athlete who just suffered a spinal cord injury, because she's a good friend. So she was a Shred Strong athlete, and I was just like, here, just take the last few months, you know, back. So do know, like, that is something that I do. Again, I don't want to do this because it just requires, I don't want to like talk about it too much. Just because it requires you to kind of jump through bureaucratic hoops, unfortunately. But if you ever want proof that I'm doing the donations, you can by all means ask me and I'll give you my personal proof, my personal receipts from Comba or other organizations. So if you are, say, for example, in California or the PNW or something like that, or out east, just let me know and I'll donate. Then the next quarter, I'll donate a portion of the sales to that, because I like to give back. Trail work is really, really important to me rather. So there are some links, you know, on how to join Shred Strong, which I'll go ahead and drop in the chat box. So if you want to learn more, you can click on the first link. Then there's the couple of other links. If you want to just go ahead and pay and you're like, yeah, let me just give this a shot. Jen doesn't seem too crazy yet. You don't know me yet. And then, you know, if you want to give it a shot, then by all means do. Again, you can cancel at any time. There's no hard feelings. Things happen. Crap. I'm trying not to curse that much. Stuff happens. Life happens. If you have to cancel, you have to cancel. But of course, if you have any feedback on the program, I'd love that too. So now it's going to be Q&A time. I'm going to go ahead and drop out of this so I can see everyone's beautiful face. And I will drop those links in the chat just so you can see. Yeah, feel free, unmute yourself if you want. Oh, good, that does work. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away any questions you have, by all means do. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share.
I have a question. It sounds like,
yeah, Helen,
it's doable. It's doable without access to barbells. So you need dumbbells.
Yes. No, so I have 2 different tracks, and I ask everyone who's joining, like, hey, do you want the barbell track, or do you have access to bands, body weight, and preferably dumbbells? If you don't have access to too many dumbbells, I know you do, but like, you know, just speaking to everyone else, if you don't have any access to any dumbbells, then I'll give you some ideas on like how to use your water bottles. Don't fill it with whiskey, but like how to use your water bottles as weights or things like that, especially the first few weeks while maybe you do acquire some dumbbells. That would be advantageous, but there's a lot of stuff you can do with bands. Like I'm a real big proponent of bands, or like I'm a huge fan of TRX, because there are some things you can do with TRX. And again, it's where some questions come in mind, where you can just ask me if you need some substitutions. But yeah, you do not need a barbell, because Helen, there's even times, I'm going to be vulnerable here. There's even times where I don't feel like doing my barbell, but I want to work out. But I'm like, I just don't feel like load. I mean, this sounds like such a diva thing to say, but I'm like, I just don't want to load on my barbell. Like, I don't have time for that crap. So I literally will just do the dumbbell version. And honestly, all it is it's basically a dumbbell version of the barbell movement. So what's cool is in the app, you can also look up. So if there's a movement where you're like, I effing hate that movement, or I don't have access to that movement, what's cool is there's three little dots next to the movement. You can click on that in the app and it gives you alternative movements that are related to that, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a cool way, should I never be like unavailable to answer any questions. But I always try to answer questions within 24 hours, as you know, Helen. But it's one of those situations where there's a substitute for anything. Like there's so many substitutes for anything. There's endless substitutes for stuff. But yes, to answer your question, barbell or non-barbell, basically.
Or barbell and band. I mean, dumbbell and bands.
Yeah, dumbbell
I have
and
access
band.
to a physical therapy gym. I'm not part of another gym. So they have barbells, dumbbells, but no barbells.
They don't have any bands though at the PT gym, right?
It's all bands, multicolored.
Yeah, I know, right?
Rainbow.
There's no bands whatsoever in a PT clinic gym. Sorry, I'm being a smart. This is me.
That's right. There are flags. The bands are the flags of the room.
Yes, they really are. You just like pull them out of the box. I don't know, whatever you need. If you need another band, you just pull out of the box and get what you need. But yeah, so that's a good question. Thanks for asking. It's a good edit I should make for the next time I do this. Thank you. Any other questions? What about climbing? Any questions about climbing?
I had not climbing, but the strength routine associated with mountain biking, would it help with skiing too?
Oh, yes, totally. So I should just slip you a 20, Helen. Yeah, yes.
Coffee will do.
Really, I did not put her up to these questions, I promise. Yes, it does. And actually, that is a common question that I do get online. So they DM me like, ooh, I'm not going to be fat biking during the winter, but I will be skiing and or snowboarding. Like, will this impact that? And I'm like, hell no, it'll be fine actually. Because again, we start off pretty slow. So especially the first 4 to 6 weeks, because I don't want everyone to be like injured because that's irresponsible. But 4 to 6 weeks, like, let's go ahead and just ease you into this. And then by about week 8, that's when we really start to like, okay, like we're in a good place. You all have more sound core and more sound mobility now, because I'm doing a lot of like ankle mobility stuff. I'm really helping with certain things that maybe you just have neglected. And it's no fault of your own, because it's even stuff that I neglect and I know better. And it's one of those situations where I want to ease everyone in. And it's actually perfect because then ski season really starts. And then you're really getting used to a lot of the single leg stuff and things like that, whether you're skiing or snowboarding. But yeah, no, it's really good. And I'm not going to be giving you 40 different exercises for every workout. If anything, there's going to be a warm-up section. You're going to ease into that. It's a specific warm-up section that I do for every single workout. So it's not a generic warm-up. It's a specific warm-up for those specific movements that we're doing that day. And then we progress through that. And the warm-ups usually last about 12 minutes just to get you through that full range of motion. And then it elicits some power. So I do some power movements to help you get that central nervous system really firing and ready to work out, which is really important, especially if you just woke up, if you're a morning workout person, or if you work out in the afternoon after work, then it kind of helps you get into that mindset of going after the work or going after the workout and focusing on yourself. So, kind of ease through that. And then we do the main lift of the day shortly after the warm up and the focused movements that mimic the movement pattern we're doing that day. Then we do the main lift of the day. So that way, if you only have time for that, great. You only have time for that. Then you basically will have a workout for 20 minutes. So that's why I'm real big on like just going through the motions, basically doing the 12-minute warm up, 8 to 12-minute warm up, hitting at least the main workout or the main lift of that day, which is what we call the key performance indicator or KPI. Hit that. And then you can kind of pick what accessory work you want to do if time is limited. So it is a little bit of a choose your own adventure, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, if you have other sports to do, if you have skiing and snowboarding and, and or fat biking even, or trail running. I do have a few folks that I train right now in the current Shred Strong program who love running. So there is movements that I will bring into the mix, that work like your shin muscles and things like that. But what's cool is even though I'm doing that for runners, it's also really good for mountain bikers too, because think about the position that you're in, heels down a lot in that position over the bike. So it really helps to have like a stronger shin muscle. But yeah, it's good for everyone. I try to think of all the athletes. And it's neat because I do have a couple PTs in my network. Tori being actually one of them, who I'm going to start picking her brain a little bit more. But, I do have a couple of PTs in my network where I do pick their brain in terms of, what are some movements that are really beneficial for this if they're having some issues with balance. And sometimes I've been known, if I know I have a couple of clients who are having an issue with that, chances are they're not the only one that are having issues with that. So I'll incorporate it into the Shred Strong program, and it benefits everyone. It's pretty cool. So yeah. Any other questions, Ben, Stacia, Chris? Flower, you joined. Yay. So glad you joined. Yeah, just unmute. Or you can ask it in the chat if you don't want to go in the chat and you're totally zoomed out. Totally up to you.
Hey, Jen, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, hell yeah. Of course. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. What would you say is like the weekly time commitment on your program?
I mean, honestly, I'm a real big supporter of doing the 2 strength workouts plus an interval session if you can. So the interval session you can do on an indoor bike, like if you have a Peloton or an indoor trainer, like I have a Wahoo Thingamajiggy, or whatever you have, try to do the intervals on that, or you can do the intervals outside. If you have a gravel bike, you can pretty much use that year round as long as it's not AC. Or if you live in a place that has a little bit more temperate climates, then you can do it outside. I do have some clients down in Arizona, so like they can ride year round. But the interval session can also technically be done also on a ski erg, rower, something like that, if you want to at least get a little bit of an idea of the time range. So I put in the instructions for the programming. I give them ideas. I give my team ideas of like, hey, you can do this on your favorite cardio machine, like if you have an elliptical at home or something like that, because maybe you don't have access to a bike during the winter months, and that's totally fine. I try to give them some ideas of what to do with that same type of time domain that I do list in the intervals. That way you're still working at the same capacity, but maybe it just looks different because you're on a treadmill or because you're on an elliptical or something like that. So the intervals, I usually have them be about 45 minutes to maybe an hour, give or take like a few minutes. But my goal is usually an hour is a sweet spot for most people. So you're not in the gym for 2 hours, because I know I don't have time for that. I've been on programs that did have me in the gym for 2 hours and was not my favorite thing in the world. But I'd say, again, about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on if you're doing the barbell workout or not. So 30 to 60 minutes for the strength workouts twice a week, and then interval workouts. So you're looking at least 3 hours at a minimum. And then keep in mind that third strength workout that I do put in the programming, which is usually a little bit more core and a little bit more accessory stuff, that's going to take you roughly about 30 to 40 minutes as well. So you're looking at about maybe 3.5 hours of strength training and or conditioning every week. And what I do always recommend in the information section of the app, it's like the program section of the app. I do recommend people having at least one fun ride a week, because you can keep whatever ride schedule you want. Like if you're used to riding 3 days a week, great. Keep the ride 3 days a week schedule if that's working for you until the first snowfall, for example. Do that if it brings you joy. Make sure that at least one of those rides is just for fun. I don't want you looking at your power meter. I don't want you looking at anything. I want you to just have fun, and I want you to shred. But that's really kind of the parameter that I would say is like 3 hours at a minimum, to maybe like 3.5 hours if you do the extra workout, the third workout, if that makes sense. So yeah. Cool. Yeah. And again, if you don't even have time for that, like I said earlier, you can just do the warm up And then you can, and like I said, the warm-up's about 8 to 12 minutes because like I'm a diesel engine. So I need as long as I possibly can for a warm-up. So I'll usually do like the maximum, usually about 12 minutes. Sometimes I'll sneak in another set just because, my body can be a little cranky. So I need a little bit more of a warm up and do that. And then do the main lift, that KPI that day. And then do however many accessory movements you can do in the following sets that I have listed in the app. So if you're running like short on time, then yeah, just cut the last superset. It's not the end of the world. I am not the type of coach that's like black or white. I want people to get in what they can get in, and not like try to just drive themselves crazy in the process, if that makes sense. Yeah, thanks, Stacia. Stacia. Yes, Stacia. I'm like questioning myself on your name. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, take care. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Ben. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I wanted to ask, when you're talking about climbing, what length climb are we talking about here? Is this like a 1 minute tiny little technical section, or because some of that stuff sounds like the opposite of what I get into on a long, gradual, sustained climb where I'm just sitting on my back wheel and chilling. So
on a longer climb. So my focus was on a longer climb because that's usually what I hear most people express lack of joy about. I don't want to say complain because complain is such a negative word, but they usually express, not so much joy about that. So I was more thinking about, okay, these are some tips, especially with the technique stuff that I talked about in terms of like moving your butt up a little bit, moving your hips and butt up on the saddle a little bit more. That's really going to make that climb a lot less painful, I should say, a lot more enjoyable, possibly. Maybe enjoyable is a strong word, but it will at least give you a lot less pain in the process. And that's ultimately what's really important. Now, some of the tips that I gave for like technique, or not technique, but technical stuff and features, that's definitely more in the shorter term. Like, okay, if you're kind of coming up on something like, let's try to, increase that speed a little bit, or maybe change your tempo a little bit, or change your cadence rather a little bit. So, I mean, yes and no for both, I'd say, but ultimately I wrote these tips for like the long, grueling climbs that you just have to kind of put your head down and get through it. But yeah, hopefully some of the feature stuff also helps with the shorter, punchier climbs. Now, where do you live, Ben?
I'm in Summit County, up in Silverthorne.
Okay, yeah, we're not far at all because I'm in Denver County. So yeah, like thinking about like, just some longer climbs here that we have, or even like even like Lair of the Bear or Evergreen Mountain, where it's just a little bit more of a longer climb. And then Evergreen changes as you get to near the summit, it gets a little bit more technical. So you're having to kind of to put in a little bit more effort with some of the work on those features that you're doing. So yeah, hopefully just shifting your hips will help a lot, especially for those grinds of the climb. And high alpine climbs, that's when it comes really handy. It's just moving your hips up, like literally it's just like like an inch or two, just moving them up a little bit. It like makes such a big difference. So
awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, no, of course. I know we try to hammer that home, especially for folks who live on the Front Range, whenever we're doing clinics here, because our climbs can be a lot more intense than like when we're in Sedona or something. In Sedona, they can be, don't get me wrong, like I'm not belittling the climbs in Sedona by any means, but they're just a little bit more punchy usually. And here in Colorado, they're just longer climbs. So in clinics, we usually try to emphasize like, just move your hips up a little bit. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable, So yeah, I don't know. If there's one takeaway, it would be that. Let's just try it.
On Belcher Hill, you're suggesting that we have that inappropriate positioning of the saddle the entire way?
Try it. Just try it, because I know you're going over baby heads and stuff, and it's not like the most enjoyable thing because it's technical basically. And those damn little things like move everywhere and every which way. But you'll be surprised because it is a good way to weight your front wheel down a little bit more. So you'll notice you're not as squirrely, but
you get used to it on sustained. You get used to that position on a sustained basis.
Yeah, you really do. And it's just a slight position change. Like, and you'll notice it. And that's why I say, like, tongue in cheek, like it's going to feel like your saddle's getting a little inappropriate with you. But that means you're in a good position. Like, okay, that's good. You know, your saddle's getting fresh with you. Great. Like, let's just stay in that position. And again, don't forget, chest down a little bit more. Try not to stay upright, but chest down a little bit more, hinging at the hips. So don't like round your back. Oh, look at my pillow with Milo. I was trying to not show that. There's my dog. So that's a pillow for my sister-in-law. But like, try not to do this number where, you know, my back is like really, really round it. Still try to keep that core nice and engaged and just focus on like hinging at the hips a little bit more. And that would be really beneficial. And it does take some getting used to. I'm not going to say like, oh, you're going to do it. And you're going to be like, this feels amazing. I feel like, yes, like I can hold this position forever, because it won't. You will not feel like that maybe at first, but then you're going to be like, huh, after a few minutes, you're going to notice like, I can actually, like, I feel like I'm generating more power from this position. And that's because you are. So Belcher might be a little bit less of a pain in the ass.
Jen, am I allowed to say this?
That was funny.
Maybe I'll try this on my road bike first.
Oh, I mean, you can.
I mean, I don't road bike ever, but
yeah,
if I did,
you can certainly. I will say the road bike geometry can be a little bit different than like a mountain bike geometry, but give it a try. You might notice, and on the road bike, it might need to be less of a scoot of your butt. So just again, because of geometry, but this is something that helps you keep in mind, you know, these tips are more geared for like mountain biking. But yeah, I mean, I've noticed, especially if it's a really like whenever I was out in San Francisco and I was with my team out there and we were doing like those insane, like 28% grade roads out in San Francisco, then yes, scooting up of the hips a little bit on the saddle did help for sure. But not as excessively as you might need to do on a mountain bike, if that makes sense. Helen, I love your place. Sorry, I just like, it's really cute.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
This is good timing.
Well, good.
Transition season.
Yeah, no, it really is, you know, and that was kind of the goal. And my coach certainly wanted me to do this and kind of put this out for everyone, because she's like, you need to talk about what you do more often. I was like, oh yeah, that's an idea. I should probably do that. Because sometimes I just get so attached to my current team. But
I am. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm concerned about my sustained willpower for those, for that commitment of 3 to 4 times a week. I know totally intellectually it's what I need and good for me.
Yeah. So one of the first Zooms will be to talk about our why. And it's totally cheesy coming out of my mouth, but it helps to have something in mind and as a reminder of why you do it and why you did sign up for it originally and what the difference is in terms of how you can feel, how much better you can feel. So that's one of our first Zooms in the first few weeks, is like really digging into that why and getting really clear on that, and then setting some goals for yourself. So it's going to be a nice little why workshop with goal setting. And that can help a lot, because trust me, Helen, like I know I'm a coach, but I have difficulties as well. Like there's a lot of times that I take rest days a little bit more excessively because I need to work on something with my business or, you know, with my partner or something like that. But I literally have like a Post-it note off to my side here where it's just my reminder of I move my body, I move my bike and my body because it brings me joy and it makes me feel less stressed. And just to remind myself not to forget my why. And then there I am with my derpy dog. And my derpy better half. No, she's not derpy, but it's one of those situations where you just need that like friendly reminder of why you're doing it, you know, because there's seasons in life. I'm real big on that. Like there's some seasons where you're like, hey, I can hammer it right now because it's winter and I just want to be inside and I'm more comfortable like hitting the gym or doing a workout at home. because it's dark out and I know I can't get on my bike. At least that's how it is usually for me. But, you know, it helps to kind of have that motivation year round, and how you can kind of hone that. And I don't even want to call it motivation, because motivation is such an elusive thing that we can lose. And I think we depend too much upon. And unfortunately, motivation is not always there. So we need to kind of make our own motivation, and having that why is incredibly important as just a reminder. So yeah, I totally get you, Helen. And that's why I do it as cancel anytime, just in case. You know, of course, I'd like to know if there was something in the program that I could have made better, then by all means, let me know. But if you're just like, hey, I'm not even hitting one workout a week, like this is just too hard, let me know. Like we can talk about it. And then, you know, if push comes to shove, then yeah, you can cancel it. Of course, I don't want that, but you know, it is what it is. And again, no hard feelings. I mean, that's why I make the price point friendly. That way people are like, you know, maybe I'm going to have to miss a month, but it's not hurting you. Whereas if, you know, if you were a one-on-one client, that was a little bit more, obviously more an investment with me. That's my goal. That's why I made Tread Strong. It's something for kind of everyone, you know, it's more accessible, and it's just friendlier should you ever miss, you know, a few weeks at a time, and you're not feeling like totally strapped or anything like that. But
I like the idea of help kind of articulating why, or examples to kind of go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to not just, yeah, it's nice to share.
No, it is. And, you know, sharing is caring. And it's one of those things too. Even if you get in the 2 strength workouts a week, that is ultimately like the greatest minimum that you can do. So try not to think of it too much in terms of the 3 strength workouts plus the intervals. Try to think of it in terms of like, hey, I can definitely nail these 2 strength workouts, and then do that for a few weeks, and then like 2 to 4 weeks, and then see like, okay, maybe I can actually work in this 3rd shorter strength workout. You know, I'm real big on that. Like, let's do what you're able to do. And that's something we'll talk about during the why workshop and goal setting workshop, is looking at everyone's schedule, not everyone individually, but looking at your schedule and picking like, hey, these are consistently the 2 days that I can definitely go to the gym or definitely set aside time. Because I think all too often we might schedule things on days that we know are more difficult, i.e. for me, Mondays and Tuesdays are my more difficult days every week, because those are my one-on-one client check-in days. And so for me to actually set aside an hour to work out on those days is just more complicated and difficult. So I've stopped programming things in on those days for myself, because I had to stop. So now I've reached a point where I'm like, okay, let me just go ahead and schedule Wednesday through Sunday, have Mondays and Tuesdays off. But then if I do get more time, then great, I can just move a workout in there. So that's the other thing. I'm glad you did actually say that. All of the workouts that I do program in Tread Strong are movable. So you can move them on your calendar however you want to. If Monday doesn't work for you to do deadlifts, great, don't do it on Monday. Just do it on Tuesday or do it on Wednesday, whatever day works for you. So you can actually in the calendar view, like move it around to whatever days work better for you. So yeah, I get it, Helen. I get it. I'm the same way. You just have to kind of go with what works best for you, you know, and don't force it, but try to pick the path of least resistance, just like climbing up a technical feature. You want to pick that last,
but have a commitment. I mean,
yeah.
To self.
Yes, definitely. Like have a commitment to yourself, you know, that way you have the goals in mind and you remember your why about why you're showing up, and then do the best that you can do, and then see where that takes you. And then, you know, if you're having any issues, yeah, reach out, you know, we can definitely chitty chat in the messages in the app, just kind of hammer things through. All right. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. So I'm going to let you all enjoy a delicious dinner. I know I need to eat dinner right now. But yeah, have a good dinner. If you have any follow-up questions, just let me know. You can email me at jen@shifthumanperformance.com. Oh gosh, I really need to fix my keyboard. My Mac is in need of a keyboard repair. There's my email, jen@shifthumanperformance.com. It's with one N, Jen. So it's even shorter. Just think it's short like me. So just Jen, not Jenn. If you have any follow-up questions, just let me know, or you can DM me on Instagram, whatever. Full disclosure, I am going to be camping this weekend. And I'm going to a part where supposedly reception is kind of hit or miss, which is a good thing. But if you have any questions and you're feeling ignored, please know I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can on Sunday afternoon when I get back and we drive back, or Monday morning or whatever. So just know I'm usually very responsive, but if I'm going off the grid, I'm going off the grid, unfortunately, which is kind of a nice thing, but it's also scary being a business owner. It's a weird feeling. Helen, you're giving me that look like, yeah, you need to be doing that. I try. Oh, wait, you're muted, hon.
You are on the grid so much. I'm sure.
I like what I do.
Yeah. I mean, thank you.
I do try to give Chris, thank you, Chris. And welcome back from Alaska. So jealous of your trip. But I'm going to stop the recording right now. And